This just happened last month, and I'm still shaken up by the whole thing. I'm a female, and I'm currently living alone just outside of Dallas, Texas, in an apartment with my 5-year-old Shih Tzu mix, Lucky. Lucky has a track record for wandering off whenever he gets the chance, and this is actually the entire reason for the story. I'll try to keep this part short. At my apartment, we have a community pool. My friend, who lives in the same complex, also has a dog. Her and I will frequently go hang out at the pool whenever we're both off work, and we'll occasionally bring our dogs. I headed down to the pool around noon on a Saturday with Lucky, and I met up with my friend and her dog. We were laying out sunbathing when I got a call from my boss at work. Something apparently got messed up in the accounting from the week prior, so I had to run up to my room and check my laptop. I asked my friend to watch Lucky while I was gone, and she agreed, so I left. I couldn't have been gone for more than 15 minutes, but once I came back, I immediately knew something was wrong. My friend was outside in the parking lot near the pool entrance in tears. That's when I realized that Lucky was gone. I was furious at her, but I tried not to show it, since she was obviously very upset by the whole thing. She explained that she was laying down on her chair holding Lucky's leash when he spotted a group of deer in the grass area and took off into the woods, pulling the leash right out of her hand when she wasn't expecting it. She chased after him, but he was out of sight in a matter of seconds. We spent the next couple hours roaming around the woods calling his name, but he was nowhere to be found. I was devastated. I knew I wouldn't be able to sleep or eat, so I headed up to the library and started printing off hundreds of flyers to put all around the city. I used the first picture I found on my phone. It was a picture of me and Lucky that my mom took when I first moved into my apartment. I spent the next 4 hours putting them on every street corner and pole I could find. I also contacted every animal shelter and warden in the Dallas area, asking them to let me know if anyone brought in a Shih Tzu, and after that, all I could do was wait. It truly was the longest day of my life, and every passing second felt like hours. Sometime around 11 o'clock that night, I was laying in bed wide awake, crying into my pillow. Suddenly, my phone started ringing. It was from a number that I didn't have saved in my contacts, so I answered it instantly. A man's voice could be heard on the other end. "Hey, I saw your flyer about the missing dog. I think I found him." In that moment, I felt like my entire mood did a 180. I was incomprehensibly relieved, and I shot up out of bed and started putting on my shoes. I couldn't believe someone found him. Just to be positive, I asked if he was wearing a blue and white leash with a red collar, and he said yes. Before even getting a chance to ask where I could pick him up, I was already in my car ready to go. The man went on to explain that he was a maintenance worker at the nature center about 15 minutes away from my apartment. He said that he was taking out the trash when he saw a dog rummaging through one of the trash bags by the dumpster, previously spotting one of my flyers from earlier in the day. I probably thanked him 1,000 times, and we had a very polite exchange. I told him I was 15 minutes out, and he told me he'd be waiting there with Lucky. I was driving with the windows down, music turned up, and I felt so relieved and thankful that I finally found Lucky. That was, until I got a call from another unsaved number. I couldn't remember if it was the same number that had just called me, so I checked my recent calls before answering. It wasn't. I decided to let it go to voicemail. 30 seconds later, I got a notification that the number left a voicemail. When I listened to it on speaker, my stomach dropped to the floor, and I pulled over on the side of the road right away. It was a police officer. "Hey, this is Officer Jones with the Dallas Police Department. Someone just dropped off a dog that I believe belongs to you." My entire body tensed up in a knot. I called my mom completely hysterical and explained everything that had just happened. She told me to drive to the police station and she'd meet me there, so I did just that. Well, once we got inside, Lucky was there. Still thinking that there had to be some sort of misunderstanding, I asked the police officer who brought him in, and he said that it was an older lady. In that moment, reality hit me like a ton of bricks. Some random person was trying to lure me out into the woods, pretending to have my dog. I gave the officer the entire story and provided him with the number that called me. He was able to get in contact with the older lady who dropped off Lucky, but she didn't know of any man that worked at the nature center, so the long shot chance of them knowing each other was ruled out. He advised me and my mom to take all the flyers down as soon as possible, so we spent practically the entire night driving around taking them down. That same night, the officer called us and said that they weren't able to trace the number, and nobody was there when they came to check out the nature center. The next day, My mom contacted the nature center and asked if anyone was working there the night before around the time I got the call. The last person left at 6 p.m. I've since changed my phone number, and I've been constantly paranoid. It genuinely terrifies me knowing that someone tried doing this, and they still probably have the picture of me. The timing of the lady dropping off Lucky at the police station, and then the police officer calling me was truly a miracle. Despite this terrifying ordeal, I'm glad I at least have Lucky again. For context, I'm a female, and this happened when I was 24. In 2010, I was driving from New Orleans, LA, to Eugene, Oregon. It was just me and my 2-year-old pit bull in a 14-foot U-Haul truck with everything I owned crammed into the back, a fancy flip phone, and my printout of MapQuest directions. I think the first smartphones actually came out around that time, but I didn't have one. Cell phone service was also much spottier, and there were long stretches through the desert where I had zero service for hundreds of miles. I was driving down a lonely stretch of highway through central Texas when I realized I hadn't seen a town or exit for a very long time, and my giant U-Haul was really low on gas. Just when I started to freak out and seriously run out of gas, I spotted a small town coming up. I ended up taking the exit into this town, and it was noticeably small. I was so worried about other things that I never did pay attention to the name of the town, but there were only about 6 streets in the whole city. Once I filled up on gas, I got back on the road. For the life of me, I couldn't find my way back to the highway. I circled around the town about 4 times and started getting frustrated because it really was a tiny town. I could literally see the highway, but I couldn't find the entrance ramp, so I returned to the gas station to ask for directions. Now, when I got gas, I paid at the pump and never went in. So, as I stepped inside, I noticed a nondescript guy with black hair hanging down in front of his eyes sitting behind the counter. He didn't particularly come across as creepy, but he was definitely a little rude. He never really met my eyes, only looking down at a magazine the whole time. After asking him where I could find the entrance ramp, he gave me directions that didn't sound right at all. He was telling me to take a road that would get me to the highway in about 17 miles. For a moment, I was dumbfounded, briefly thinking I somehow really got lost, but then I pointed out that I didn't drive that far to get from the highway into town. So I basically asked him why it was so far to get back to the highway. I could literally see it from the gas station. He was being so nonchalant, almost like I was just an annoyance and could follow his directions or not, basically giving me the vibe that he didn't care. He gave me some explanation about the road curving around that didn't make any sense, still avoiding eye contact with me. When I got into the parking lot, my whole body started trembling violently, and my heart started racing, seemingly for no reason. I got back into the truck, and as soon as I put the key in the ignition, I burst into tears. I had the most terrible feeling that, no matter how nonchalant he acted, this man had bad intentions. I didn't know what, but I knew right then and there that there was no way I was going to follow his directions. Yet, this was the only open store in this little town, and, short of knocking on doors, there was no one else to ask for directions. I decided that I didn't care if this town seemed like something dropped out of the Twilight Zone. I was going to drive around until I found my way out, even if it took all damn night. Then, a big red beater of a pickup truck, as much rust as metal, pulled up, and out came the quintessential Texas man, tall, husky, and wearing a flannel and work boots. Without even thinking about it, I jumped out of the truck and approached him quickly, yet warily. Looking into his eyes, I saw a kind human being, or at least I was hoping I did. I asked him if he could please give me directions to the highway. I told him I knew it was silly, but I just couldn't seem to find my way back. He looked concerned as I was visibly upset, so he made me laugh, and very cheerfully gave me directions for a hairpin curved turnoff right at the end of a small concrete tunnel I had passed several times. He set it off to confuse travelers because it was so hard to see, adding that they need to put up signs. With a sinking feeling in my stomach, I asked him how far in miles it was back to the highway. He laughed and gave me a funny look. "Miles, miss. I'd say it's a quarter mile at most. You can see the highway from right here." At this point, I couldn't help it. I had to know. "What happens if I drive here?" I gave him the directions the man in the store had given me. The man looked at me very intently and asked me how I knew about that route. It was pretty far out, and usually only locals know about it. So, I told him. He was quiet for a few minutes, and then asked what the attendant looked like, and if I had a map of the state. "Nope, just my MapQuest, which wasn't helpful in the situation. He went back to his truck and grabbed a raggedy local map from his glove box. Spreading it out for me, he traced the route I described. The directions the man from the gas station had told me to go led me away from town, away from the interstate, and led to seemingly the middle of nowhere. The man told me that the road went about 17 miles, right before it dead-ended into the desert. I asked him what was out there, and he told me that it was nothing but some junk cars and a few trailers and mobile homes, all owned by the same family. This family was known locally as troublemakers, meth heads, and alcoholics, and these were the nice things the townspeople had to say about them. And the erstwhile clerk was part of this family and lived down that road. I'll never forget the look in the man's eyes as he told me this. He also told me that I was smart to listen to my instincts, and he told me to be careful traveling back. I don't know if the man from the gas station wanted what was in the back of my U-Haul or what was in the driver's seat, but thankfully, I didn't have to find out. And I learned that sometimes angels look like ruddy-haired Texans with scruffy faces and rusty pickups. Although I never got that man's name, I wish I could thank him again, because he saved me from something horrible. When I was 10 years old, I lived in a relatively small town in Texas in a small house with my mom. My mom has always had a very caring heart for those in need. So, when my uncle called her one night and told her he ran into a homeless girl at the local park, my mom offered to help her out for a day or so just to get her back on her feet, that sort of thing. When the girl arrived at my house, she said that her name was Laura. Laura told us she was 16 at the time. She seemed very shy. When my mother asked about what she was doing out on the streets, Laura told us that she had been kicked out of her home by her mom because her mom had accused her of sleeping with her boyfriend. Laura told us that the allegation wasn't true, and she told us her mother's boyfriend was the one who came on to her. So, my mom gave Laura a place to sleep in the guest bedroom that night. The next day, after breakfast, Laura asked to use my mom's house phone to call her mom to see if she could get some of her things from her mom's house. However, Laura's mom never answered the phone, and we all felt bad for her. Being a 10-year-old girl at the time, I couldn't imagine what she must have been going through. Later that day, I remember watching TV in the living room and minding my own business, but I could feel someone staring at me, so I turned my head where I felt the gaze. Laura had been sending me a glare so cold that if looks could kill, I would have dropped dead. I was confused and a little startled. I turned my head away from her quickly and went back to watching TV, but I could still feel Laura's cold gaze. I couldn't understand what I had done to cause her to look at me with such hate. The next day, it happened once more. I was in the kitchen getting a glass of water when I could feel someone looking at me. I turned my head to the side and saw Laura's head peering around the corner at me. Her eyes were dark and laced with hatred. It frightened me, and I was still so confused as to why she was looking at me like that. I didn't want to cause any trouble, so I didn't bring up Laura's death glares to my mother at all. Later that night, my uncle had joined us for dinner. He had stopped by to see how everything was with Laura, and if we had any luck finding her a place to live with one of my family members. After dinner, I was washing my plate in the sink when I heard a loud growling sound coming from the dining room. I turned my head to see Laura shaking and growling like some sort of wild animal. My mom and uncle looked disturbed and worried. Laura threw herself onto the floor and began thrashing around and screaming as if she were possessed. I was absolutely terrified. It was a scary thing to witness. I grew up very religious. My mom and uncle began praying out loud for Laura while I ran to my room and closed the door. This went on for 2 hours, but it felt like an eternity of horror. I could hear Laura screaming like a madwoman and growling like some sort of deranged beast. I don't think any of us knew exactly what was going on. After my mom and uncle had prayed for Laura for what felt like forever, Laura told us she was free from an evil demon that had taken over her. None of us were sure what had caused her behavior, completely taken back as to what made her behave like that. I peeked my head out of the room to see Laura smiling happily as she was curled up on the couch with a blanket. When she saw me, her eyes opened and she shot a cold glare at me. I quickly closed my bedroom in fear, then placed a chair in front of my bedroom door and tried to sleep. The next morning, I woke up to my mom at my bedside. She told me that she was taking me out to eat at my favorite restaurant. When I asked her if Laura was going, she gave me a serious expression and spoke. "Your uncle is going to take Laura back to her mom's house. He slept on the couch last night after what happened. He and I were talking when the two of you had gone to sleep, and we pieced together that Laura made up the entire performance last night. She is not stable, and we think she's dangerous." As I heard my mother say those words, relief washed over me. I got dressed and went to the car to go to the restaurant with my mom. When we got in the car, we saw Laura and my uncle getting in his truck with her. Laura looked angry. Her expression was of a child when you don't give them what they want. She got into my uncle's car, and they drove away. I'm 22 now, and I've never forgotten about this horrific incident that happened in my life years ago. After that day, I never saw Laura or heard anything else about her ever again.